What the Media Education Foundation does is it produces videos and DVDs about the media's impact on society. And you really want to look at the kind of cultural role that media play in the very complicated society we live in today. And so our subjects deal with things like gender, with politics, with commercialization, with race, and we're really interested in what are the stories that the media tell us about those things, and how do those stories then impact on the lives that people live and how they experience the world. And we want to produce videos and DVDs that talk to issues, that talk to subject matter that really matters in the lives of people, and really matters in the lives of students and perhaps young people in particular. And so our videos and DVDs are designed to be used in college classrooms, in high school classrooms, even in middle school classrooms, and to provide an introduction to subject matter that's sometimes quite complicated, to subject matter that is otherwise quite difficult to kind of access in a way that gets discussion going. I mean, another way of putting it would be to say that the Media Education Foundation's task is, or what we do is, we take the best cutting-edge research out there, the latest that experts have discovered about the culture and about the media, and we translate it, we put it into an accessible form so that in fact you don't have to be an expert to engage in these debates about very, very important issues. Because we think that these issues are too important to be left only to discussion by experts. That in fact ordinary citizens, ordinary students, anyone should be able to discuss these things, because in fact the media impact ourselves, they impact daily lives in a way that's really important, and citizens and students need to have a way to be able to talk about what's really going on in their lives. And the videos and DVDs are designed as an entry point into that, as an entry point to stimulate discussion around those things. Media education matters if you think that people should be aware of the things that influence them in daily life, that people should be aware citizens and consumers as they live their daily lives. And the reason media education matters is because media are everywhere in the modern world, that we are influenced by media in a way that we don't even realize anymore. Marshall McLuhan, the famous communication theorist, once said, we're not too sure who discovered water, but we're pretty sure it wasn't the fish. And what he meant by that was that when something is just in the environment all the time, you stop paying attention to it. And when you stop paying attention to it, in fact, that's actually when it's at its most powerful. That's when it actually has the most amount of effect on you. And the media in the modern world have become like the air that we breathe. I mean, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, whether it's CDs, whether it's video games, whether it's advertising, whether it's the internet. Everywhere we look in the modern world, we live. There is what we can call a mediated message coming at us. There is a message coming from outside of us that's produced by an industry, that's produced by people that we don't even know. And so if you want to be an aware citizen, if you want to be just an aware person in the world, you have to be aware of the environment you live in. And in the modern world, media are that environment. And so media education matters because we want people to be active agents, active in how they think about the world and in the role they play within the world. Media education is not about saying this is how you should act in the world. Media education is about making sure that people understand exactly what effect the media has. And then people are free, people are then, I think, really free to make choices based on what their own ethical and moral positions may be. But the role of media education is to get people to see the world clearly so they can really become active participants in that world. In one sense, MEF kind of started as an accident. I wish I could say I had this grand vision of creating an organization that would, do these things. But in fact, like most things, the beginnings of projects, are mired in the details. MEF started in the late 1980s and early 1990s. I'm a professor at the University of Massachusetts, and I was. This is before MEF even existed, even before I'd even thought about any kind of organization like this. I was a professor I am still a professor at the University of Massachusetts, but I was teaching a class at that time, 1990, 1991, that was, a large-scale introduction to mass communication, one of these large, first-year classes. And during the course of that, I thought, well, if I could get people to really, to have a kind of critical, analytical way of thinking about media that's really important to them, that'll be one way of getting them to, to have that distance from the world. And so I said, well, what's really important in the culture, and what's really important in the culture, and still is very important in the culture, is music videos. And so I started to, how do we understand music videos? And as I started to look at that, as I started to develop materials, pedagogical materials, teaching materials around that, I started to, develop. I used to bring in videotapes and put them in the VCR and show, a clip, and then take another one out and put another one in. And after a while, I decided to, it'd be much easier if I was to edit things together. And so I slowly started to edit music videos together. And actually over the course of a few years, in fact, I started this, I would say, in the mid-1980s. And over the course of a few years, I eventually produced this standalone piece that in fact was the first thing that the Media Education Foundation distributed, called Dream Worlds, which was to do with images of women on MTV and its connection to sexual violence and power. And I showed it in my class, and it seemed to be pretty useful to getting people to think critically about images that were very, very important to them, about images that they really identified with, and seemed to give them an analytical way of having some distance from them. So I thought, if it's useful to me, it might be useful to other teachers as well. And so I did a small mailing to other communication departments, to women's studies departments, making it available. And in fact, at this point, it was being sold through the university. So whatever money was coming in, and it wasn't very much, but was going back to the university and to the department. And so, we distributed, not very many copies of the tape. And then, lo and behold, in I think it was May of 1991, I received a letter from MTV Networks. And the letter was what's called a cease and desist letter. That said I was using their copyrighted materials, that the videos belonged to them, and that I didn't have permission to use them, and that I had to stop using them and actually record all the videos that I'd sent out because I was in violation of copyright law. I replied to them saying, actually, I wasn't in violation of copyright law, because within the copyright law of 1996, there is a very, very smart amendment, or a very smart section of that, called fair use, that says that for purposes of teaching, criticism, review, etc., you can use someone else's copyrighted materials without their permission. And that's exactly what I was doing. This was for educational purposes. I wasn't, and it was designed to, it had an educational function. So I wrote that back to them. At the same time, the letter they sent, the cease and desist letter, came both to myself and to the university. And at that point, when bureaucracies get involved, things become very confusing and things are not so clear-cut. And even though I was very clear that, I was protected under this, and that, in fact, I thought, we should make a kind of public case around it, because it was an opportunity to make a statement about free expression. It was an opportunity to make a statement about academic freedom. The university wasn't quite so convinced. And so, in fact, I decided at that point that it would be better if I split off from the university around this case and dealt with this on my own. And so actually, that was a point at which I formed the Media Education Foundation. And initially, it was to distribute just this one videotape, Dream Worlds, without involving a very kind of complex bureaucracy at the university. So that was the start of MEF, was actually as a response to a threat by MTV to try and stop distribution of this educational videotape I produced. Now, once we did that, once I'd formed MEF, I started to distribute Dream Worlds through that, and money came in from that. And MEF is a non-profit organization; it's not a business. It's a non-profit organization, which means all the money that comes in, is used then for the mission of the organization. So as the money came in from that, I decided, well, perhaps I can put it into another production. And we started to think about how we could fund new productions by selling videotapes, and, well, I was going to say DVDs, but selling videotapes at that time. And it's gone from that. It's gone from that single videotape at the start to where we are right now, which is, in the intervening 14 or 15 years. we've produced something close to 50 videotapes and now DVDs. At any given time, we have 4 or 5 productions, that are ongoing, and then we have the other half of the organization then deals with distributing it, with distributing those programs. And again, from the perspective that producing it is not enough. I've always been the thing I've always been driven by is producing great things is not enough. That unless someone sees what you've produced, that they're not really having the kind of educational effect that you want them to have. And so we put equal emphasis both on producing really, programs on really important issues, on cutting edge issues that we have to deal with, and at the same time making sure that they get out to places, they get out to classrooms, they get out to community groups, they get out to churches, they get out to all kinds of places where you need to have those kinds of discussions. To fulfill this kind of dual mission of both production and distribution actually requires quite a big staff. And so the Media Education Foundation right now has 16 full-time staff. About half of those people are involved in production, the other half are involved in marketing and distribution. And in fact, every semester we also have somewhere between 8 and 12 interns that come sometimes from local colleges, but are actually increasingly starting to come from colleges around the country, and in fact sometimes from around the world. To participate in what we do. So it's actually a very varied and diverse organization that has full-time staff involved in a number of different things, and also has the energy that interns bring as they learn and experience what exactly is involved in both production and distribution. People often ask where we get our funding. And in fact, we're supported in a kind of unusual way for a nonprofit, because a large part of our operating budget, to do both the production and distribution, actually comes from sales. We don't get a huge amount of money from foundations. And one of the things that gives us is, that's a great challenge on the one hand, because we're dependent upon people supporting our work by buying it for their universities and colleges, and that's the way we can then do new projects. It's challenging in that way, but it also gives us, and so we always have to, we're always involved in making sure that we can sell as much as we can sell. On the one hand, it's challenging. At the same time, that also gives us, what I think every nonprofit wants and what every organization wants. It gives us a degree of independence. In the sense that we can do subjects that we think are really important without worrying about, well, who's going to fund this? Can we really afford to offend people if we make a statement that needs to be made but might be controversial? And so our funding actually gives us a great deal of independence, and we're independent actually from anyone else. We're not dependent upon government. We're not dependent upon foundations. We're not even dependent upon individuals who can tailor the kind of projects that we do. And so what really drives us is asking the hardest questions we can. Is asking questions that in fact may not be very easy to ask for the culture, but that someone has to ask them. So the independence in fact gives us a great deal of autonomy that's absolutely vital for us to be able to deal with really difficult issues without the fear of offending anyone. At the same time, we're looking to expand our programs, for example, into teacher training, and that's going to require a different kind of support. For the Media Education Foundation to be successful in its stated mission of raising media issues so that they're debated, really requires us to be in partnership with hundreds, in fact thousands of teachers and instructors across the country, whether they're in college classrooms, whether they're in high schools, whether they're in middle school classrooms, because they're really doing the work that really needs to get done by taking the materials that we produce and then integrating them into their own classrooms and into their own work to make sure that the videos have the desired effect of stimulating debate. And so this work would simply not be possible without our partnership with teachers across the country.